Well, good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's William Davis here, Director of Education for Wilson Daniels. And we thank you for joining us here on this Thursday for a special relaunch of the Routestock Wines. So we're going to have Vance Rose, our winemaker extraordinaire, on the call in just a moment. So he's actually going to be joining us from our brand new Instagram account that's directly related to Routestock Wines. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to him about what's going on with the winery, as well as talk about the new label, the new packaging, and sort of like a little snippet of what to expect for the future of the Routestock Winery and those wines. So as soon as he comes on, we will get him on. And thanks everybody for joining us. I know it is a beautiful day. I'm sitting here in Houston, Texas. We have a spring luxury offering tasting here that's going to be held in about an hour at the Art of Cellaring, or AOC, here in town. So things are really active. They are moving very quickly. So just a non-stop of activity and excitement that's going on. Certainly everywhere. So as soon as Vance and the Routestock Wines, happen to pop up and come on, we will go live. So just wanted to give a back shot of some Napa vineyards. So as soon as he pops up, it's good to see Greg and so many other people joining us today. So as soon as he comes on, we will get him on board. Looks like De Jour Dining, so that is his personal Instagram page, is on. So let's see if we can, there we go. Okay, so looks like we're going to have Vance here in just a moment, sitting out in California. So just waiting for the connection to happen. And there he is.
Hey,
Vance, how are you, buddy?
good. Sorry for the delay.
It is quite all right. That's the joy of technical difficulties and challenges. It's even when we're making wine, there's always something that you have to switch, pivot, turn, and the most important thing is that we made it here together. So, how's the weather in California? I actually am going to be out there this weekend for.
Well, you're going to be in for a great weekend. It's been really, really beautiful. It's been a very dry spring, unfortunately, but really beautiful. Today is a high of about 76 degrees, low of about 48, and beautiful sunny skies behind me back there. And great. It's going to be a little warmer for the weekend in the low to mid 80s. You'll have a great time. I promise you, William.
I'll be throwing the shorts on. I've been wearing suits and jackets all week, so it'll be nice to.
No, none of that allowed up here. You got to rock the shorts.
California casual, or should I say California cool? Well, thanks again for spending a little bit of time with us. So, there's been a lot of things happening with the Wilson Daniels portfolio, but also something that's been happening, a lot happening with Routestock as a whole. So why don't you kind of run us quickly through what's been going on in the last 12 months? We've got COVID, but you've been extremely busy.
Yeah, we've been extremely busy on two fronts, on the winemaking front and vineyard front, as well as the marketing front. I think the biggest change that's occurred with Routestock is the introduction of the new label. We designed this label about 1 year ago now and bottled the first wines last summer, and then just we bottled reds, Pinot Noir and Cabernet last summer, and then whites, Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay just a month or so ago, just probably 30 days ago. And so those wines are all working their way out into the markets with these new packages. And what that is just our way of showing all the upgrades that we've been doing in our vineyard sourcing and in winemaking. We wanted to express that in the package so people know that we're moving up.
No, I remember seeing the initial samples as well as the prototypes, and there were a couple of options that we had. One with the more of a classic landscape backdrop of vineyards with one of the roads. Because a lot of people, they're familiar with rootstock, but the concept of rootstock came from not only the rootstock itself, of what all vines and rootstocks are planted upon, but also the roads that run through many of those important AVAs in the United States. So, to you, when we think about the new label, what does it embody and envision for you?
Well, what it is that rootstock, which we have on the new label, a little bundle of roots there, is the symbolism of those roots going into the ground to start that vine's life. And that's how every grapevine starts, and it grows for about 3 years before it makes its first grapes. And we don't use grapes off of those very, very young vines. For rootstock, we let our vines get deeper, but it's that getting into the soils and that juxtaposition of the word root, of rooting down into the soil, and root that we drive through these areas of Napa and Sonoma where our grapes come from. We're fortunate enough, we deal with about 10 or 11 different growers around Napa and Sonoma every year. And it's, they're part of our roots. Their vines are part of our roots. And that's really what makes the brand what it is. I would love to tell you that me as the winemaker, I have full control and I do everything, but that's really not right. It's really these grape growers that we deal with, that I deal with on a daily basis, that make this brand what it is. It's those roots going into the soil, William.
Yeah, and what I love about looking at rootstock now, it's always been a part of Wilson Daniels. It was initially that part of that DNA, and one of those wineries that we own, as opposed to being a conduit, a representative of for many of the family wineries around the world that we represent here in the United States. But I think, under your guidance, there's been more of a soul associated with rootstock. And I think it's because of the relationships that you have with many of these growers. So, walk us through really what happened during COVID, because, I think that, everything was turned upside down. How were you able to maintain those relationships and, still come up with these incredible wines?
COVID was really probably had less overall impact on vineyards and growers than any of the rest of our day-to-day life, because you think about it, vineyards are outside. It's safer to be outside than in. And generally, most of that vineyard work is done mostly with social distancing. There's really one exception to that, is generally, pre-COVID, when we worked a row of vines, you had a person on each side of that row and you worked on the same vine at the same time. And when COVID came, the biggest thing that, that we worked with our growers, and our growers worked with their vineyard workers and vineyard management people, was to not have those people face to face on either side of the vine. So it was really simple. You just stagger them on either side of the vine, and they can still talk to each other and they can still see each other, but they're, at least 10 or 12 feet apart. And of course, they still have a mask on, even though they're outside and 10 feet apart. So that is the only little change that has really happened. And of course, that came about last March. And then we had fires here. We had 2 sets of fires in Napa and Sonoma in 2020. And that really changed things more than COVID ever thought about changing things. 2020 was one of the most difficult harvests that we've seen, probably going back to 2011, which was an extremely wet harvest. And I think, though, the 2020 double fires were even more changing and more difficult than that. And it really kind of made us forget about COVID. Not that we didn't do all the same protocols and take the same precautions. It was extremely important for us and for all of our growers to keep those vineyard workers healthy, because we get nowhere without them being able to do their work. And most people don't understand how many times a vineyard crew needs to go into that vineyard between the time that we prune it in February or early March to the time that we harvest in September and October. It takes a lot of work, and you have to have those workers do it. And so our biggest thing was keeping those workers safe during that, during COVID, and making sure that they were healthy and able to do the work that we and every other winery in the world needed for them to do.
Now, I can imagine, just a shortage. Was there a shortage of workers as well that you noticed in the, in the North Coast and, surrounding areas?
Yeah, we have had a shortage of workers for a few years. Most of the workers that we have in these vineyards tend to be non-citizens, whether green card or not. And that, as became harder for people to get into the country. And that has put a serious strain on all agricultural. And the wine industry was no exception. I think we don't rely generally on migrant workers. The people that we have generally work in these vineyards 9 months out of the year. And if they're non-citizens, they tend to go back and work their own farms for a few months and then come back. Well, that going and coming became much more difficult for people. And then when COVID came, it became even more difficult. And so, but, we're, as a wine industry, have been much better off than some of these other agricultural entities in California that rely on migrant workers, because those have really become short. Most of our workers are permanent, full-time vineyard workers here and live here in our communities.
And that's to me, that's where a winery like Routestock is so different than many of the other wineries that we associate with a number of different vineyards, or even sometimes finished wine that's going into these bottlings. We talk about the negociant model in Europe or in other parts of the world, but here this is really where you're involved on a day-to-day basis with those growers, with the people that are working those vines every month, every day, every week. What are some of the areas that you noticed that were shining stars in 2020? I call it the year of COVID. Whether or not it was certain parts of Sonoma Coast or even parts of Napa. Which ones really seem to be head and shoulders above the rest?
Well, 2020, as I said, was a unique vintage because it started out with COVID, and we all thought it would be known as the COVID vintage. And then, fires came, and that changed things because people were, they had a hard time getting to certain vineyards. Some wineries burned down. I mean, it was pretty traumatic. But the biggest threat was to what we call smoke taint, and you'll hear more of that as the 2020 vintage comes along. But all of our Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir was picked before the fires. So, we were fortunate for that. There was a little fire early in northwestern Sonoma County that could have had an effect on one of our two Pinot Noir vineyards, but the prevailing wind was going the other direction, and the smoke never got to that vineyard. And so, and we were also fortunate that where we were making our wines was about 30 or 40 miles from the fires. And so it was, we didn't have any interruption of service. Now, with COVID in wineries, it is harder to keep social distance. There's certain things that need to be done, sometimes as a pair. And so testing was one very important part of that. Many workers getting tested multiple times per week, and changing the protocols of how close and how many people in what proximity, and of course masks. And for me, masks was kind of in my day-to-day life, we're fine. I'm happy to put my mask on. I still do it all the time. I had it on multiple times this morning. But, the thing as a winemaker, what you have to do in the winery is you need to smell and you need to taste, particularly when those wines are fermenting, because that's when you're making the decisions of how that wine is going to go and what you want it to be. And so, you can't have anyone near you or around you when you take your mask off to smell and when you taste. And that was amazingly easy to do, because generally you're up on top of a catwalk smelling that fermentation, that tank that it's fermenting in, or sticking your nose in a barrel if it's barrel fermenting, or on the top of a concrete egg if that's what you're fermenting in. And so that was really the change there, the COVID. You have your mask on, and normally you walk into a winery and you smell all sorts of wonderful fermenting smells. But you kind of had to wait till you got to your specific tank or your barrels or your egg to take your mask off and smell. And that's still, the same way today. Fortunately, when we're tasting now the 2020 wines, we're tasting them out of barrels or out of concrete eggs. And so it's easier to do. But that's certainly been been a change.
I can imagine. So, I guess when we look at the new labeling, on that has just been released and is now out in most markets, most of that's going to be the 19 vintage. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the 19s. How excited were you, on the quality of the 19s compared to, other, very well-known and classic vintages like 16 and 17?
Yeah, 19 was really a fun, exciting vintage. It was a little warmer than some. It was earlier. We've continued this trend of earlier bud break, earlier flowering, earlier harvest. Like Pinot Noir in 19, one of the vintages we harvested in August, and that is unusual for Pinot Noir. It's happened before, but it's unusual, and it's kind of striking, because I used to harvest Sauvignon Blanc in October, and now that's almost all in August. And so, it has been a change, but 19 was warm and early. And I think on the Sonoma coast, it was a little more even temperature than some of the more inland areas, because the Pacific Ocean keeps that really cool. We have two vineyards for Pinot Noir. One is about 2 miles inland from the Pacific, so it really is influenced by the Pacific. So it doesn't get that hot during the day. There, it was a vintage of less fog, so you had less fog in the morning, which you typically have out there. And so you had more sunshine. That drives that kind of earlier earlier harvesting. The other vineyard is a little more inland, and we harvested that first in August, and then about mid-September, the extreme Sonoma Coast part of it. And I think, we've had a pretty good little run with people saying nice things about the Routestock Pinot Noir. 17 was, in the top 100 wines of the year, and Wine Spectator, kind of the Oscars of wine. And it's very nice to have that kind of honor. The 18 was received extremely well, but the 19 for me is the best of all three of those wines. In fact, it received probably the highest praise I've ever gotten for a wine recently, when one of your fine Wilson Daniels employees I ran into in your office in Napa, and she said, "Oh, I tasted that 19 Pinot Noir, and I love it." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you." She said, "No, I love it." She said, "It is the single greatest, best wine that I've ever tasted in my life." I was like, wow, that's high praise. So I'm excited about the 19s. I think the 19 Pinot Noir really is the best vintage that we've done, and I'm excited to see that get out there, not only for the new package, but the wine is great. And we've been very fortunate in Pinot Noir to work with the same two growers in all of those vintages. We love them, and we don't want to change, and we've worked with them again in 2020. I'm working towards the 2020 bottling of Pinot Noir in the last couple of days of July. So I've been kind of getting that wine ready to go, and I'm excited about that one. But for the 19 to hit the market is amazing, and the 19 Chardonnay is out there. The 2020 Chardonnay and the 2020 Sauvignon Blanc with the new packages will be coming, hitting the markets really any time now. And I'm excited for this new vintage of Sauvignon Blanc. It was done the same way that we've always done Sauvignon Blanc, a little bit in barrel, a little bit in stainless steel, and a little bit in concrete egg. We did up the percentage of Semillon in this one for a little more mouthfeel. We've always had 5, 6, 7% of Semillon in our Sauvignon Blanc. This one has about 20% Semillon in it, and I kind of like that mouthfeel, and it's I'm excited to get it out there.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of the things I've always loved about the Rootstock Sauvignon Blanc is that, at least in our portfolio, it gives us a different expression of New World Sauvignon Blanc. We've got New Zealand and Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc covered, but this is much more in that bridge to, either classic Fumé Blanc or even a white Bordeaux, at similar price points, that you could not only have for by the glass, but also for, retail features at $20. So it's really one of those, really undiscovered and fun wines if you've never tried it. And it still maintains, that classic acidity. Is that coming from some of those specific, slightly cooler climate sites that you're working from, or is it more about elevation?
Well, I think it is about temperature as well as exactly how you grow it. Sauvignon Blanc is, so much of its flavor is derived in the vineyard. Again, I would love to take all the credit as a winemaker that I did it all. And with Sauvignon Blanc, that is far, far from the truth. But how many clusters you have and how many leaves you have per shoot is extremely important. How much sunshine you allow to hit that cluster, or how shaded that you keep it is extremely important. If you have more leaves, you're driving more green flavors into the grapes. The more shady, the more of that bell pepper character you're going to get. But if you expose too much of that cluster to sun, then you're going to get that kind of mango guava something that's a little bit too ripe for for what we're looking for. So we kind of need to combine that cooler, more moderate temperature with the right growing techniques, because how you grow Sauvignon Blanc is so important. It's the only grape I can go out into the vineyard the week before harvest and taste that fruit and know exactly what that wine's going to taste like. It tastes just like that grape taste. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, none of those you can do that. But Sauvignon Blanc is fun because you can do that. But you have to control it in the vineyard, because you don't have as much control over it once it gets to be in the winery.
I never thought about Sauvignon Blanc being transparent in that way. It's like it's got nowhere to hide. This is exactly what you get. So we have to use that in the future. So what about Chardonnay? How are the Chardonnay vineyards for you in 19?
Yeah, Chardonnay is such an interesting thing for me, because I probably shouldn't say this in a public forum, but I don't love most California Chardonnays. And I'm a bit of a snob that way. I drink a lot more white Burgundy than I ever do of California Chardonnay, just because, that trend of a lot of oak and that extractive butterscotch character just is not my thing. And fortunately, I have you guys at Wilson Daniels are a great team, and that's not your thing either. And so I can make a wine that certainly is California, but not that oaky butterscotchy thing. And so what I'm trying to achieve with Chardonnay is pretty simple. I mean, there's 4 basic elements to white wine: fruit, oak, acidity, and alcohol. And I just need to get those 4 things balanced in together. And that for me makes interesting wine, and not when you have that ultra high alcohol or ultra oaky or ultra butterscotchy. Because to me, when you taste a wine, it's like a ball, and you put that ball on the tip of your tongue and it rolls to the back and rolls all over your mouth. And if there's one element that's standing out, it's whacking you in the mouth every time it goes by. And that's not fun, and particularly not fun after about 2 or 3 sips. And it's not where you want to have that next glass and finish that bottle and have the next bottle. So making Chardonnay that is lively and bright and savory is extremely important. I can make it, bright just by picking early and have a lot of acidity, but it still then wouldn't be in balance. And so, I've got to work with just a tiny, tiny little bit of new oak, usually no more than about 5 to 8%, but age the rest in neutral oak, because I need that oxygen exchange to create the length on the palate, versus doing it in stainless steel, where you don't get oxygen into the wine and it never creates any richness or any length. And so, picking at the right time for the alcohol, getting the right acidity, having just the right amount of oak in it can create that balance. Because I want that Chardonnay to be savory. I want to have a sip and want to have the next sip. That's what's important to me in Chardonnay.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's a lot of producers now in California and throughout the New World that are trying to make a wine for the sake of elegance. And the wines are trying to be more of an old world interpretation or expression. And the way that they're trying to make that wine is with a little bit of, per se, reductivity, right? It's like, well, if we're going to get a little bit of this match, this gunflint, this matchstick kind of component to it, that reminds me of what I'm drinking in Burgundy or Chablis or other places. And yours don't come across that way. And it's not because that it isn't elegant. It's because you don't have to include a little bit of SO2 and trying to push, that style. It's really classic fruit. You can't hide what you're getting in California, but it doesn't have to be over the top. It can be drinkable from day one.
And that's the beauty of California, is that the fruit. And so, of those four elements we talked about in white wine, fruit was the first one that I mentioned. And that's extremely important. When I taste a wine, I want to know what varietal it is. And I want to know, that it is fruit, and Chardonnay is a fruit. And we want to be able to taste that, but we don't want it to dominate the thing. And just like I don't want alcohol to dominate, or oak to dominate, or acidity. And so, I think what I try to do, I would describe myself, William, as a lazy winemaker. I want to do as little as possible as I can to the fruit, because when you're making wine and everything goes right, it's about 90% artistry and 10% chemistry. When things go wrong, it's about 90% chemistry and 10% luck. And I don't love chemistry. I hate it. And so what I do to avoid that is work with the best, cleanest fruit that I can, so that I don't have any problems, so that I can be a lazy winemaker. And I want to grow those grapes in the vineyard, and I want those grapes to grow up and be whatever they want to be. If that grape wants to grow up and be a ballerina, then I want it to be a ballerina. If it wants to grow up and be a boxer, then it should grow up and be a boxer. I'm not trying to manipulate those grapes and force them into a box that they don't want to be in. And, fortunately, I can work with, I pick these growers, I've sought them out, and I work with them, on a daily basis. I'll be in a couple of them between today, tomorrow, and Saturday. So I can work with them and get them to do the things that we want to do, so that when it gets to the winery, I don't have to manipulate it. And I can let that ballerina be a ballerina, and let that boxer be a boxer. So that's the lazy part. And the other lazy part is I am a believer that if a wine is going to do something on its own, then let it do that on its own. Don't force it. Their secondary fermentation, most people inoculate for that, put a chemical in their wine to make that happen. That wine's going to do that on its own, so I don't add that chemical. I let the wines go through a second fermentation on their own. And so we don't use additives. We don't do anything. Our wines generally are fruit. There's some of them we use commercial yeast. The reds we do not. And there's SO2, some of which is naturally occurring, some of which we add to keep the wine from oxidizing too early. And so there is no wine that we make that has more than 3 elements in it. And if you go to the store and pick up a bottle of wine in Routestock's price point, those wines are going to have 12 to 20 different ingredients in them, many of which you and I can't even pronounce. And
that's why we don't like chemistry.
That's right. I hate it. And so I don't want to get all those things I can't pronounce in there. And that's extremely important to me. And if you're dealing with healthy fruit like we do, then you don't have to add too much SO2 as a preservative, because the fruit is already healthy. You don't need to keep it away. And the other kind of counterintuitive thing that we do at Rootstock is that most people think that oxygen is bad for wine. I mean, I just said we don't want the wine to oxidize, right? Well, it's interesting that a lot of people try then to keep all oxygen away from their wines at all points in time. And that is really not healthy for a wine. A wine needs to have a lot of oxygen early in its life, during fermentation, and during the first 2 or 3 months of aging. And what that does is the more oxygen it can take in at that point, the more oxidative strength that it has for the rest of its life, meaning it can fight off oxygen better later in life. So if you starve a wine from oxygen by keeping it in a stainless steel tank, which is inert, no oxygen gets in, then that wine's not going to have that oxidative strength, and it's going to oxidize earlier, it's going to tire earlier, and it's not going to age particularly well. And so that's one thing we do, is make sure that these wines get a good dose of oxygen in that first couple of months of their lives. And so, those are a few of the things that we do a little differently here at Routestock. And Routestock also, I do need to say, these wines, every one of them are aged in oak, predominantly French, very, very little American, just a touch of American on the Cabernet, because there's one Cooper that I really like. But these aren't shortcut wines. These aren't stainless steel, oak chip, bottle it in a hurry and get it out the door. That's not what we do. We're taking every care in the vineyard and every care in the winery to bring really fun, interesting, enjoyable wines at a more interesting price point, we hope.
Well, that's what I love about you coming on to think that it was 7-8 years ago when you came on. It's we've been here together through this ride. So you are the soul of this non-interventionist, non-manipulated approach to winemaking that we have for Routestock. But with you being the soul of Routestock, where do you see Routestock going in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I think that the hardest thing that we have to do is to keep our grape growers happy, profitable, and still growing grapes. The grape prices go up and down like a roller coaster. And what we have been able to convince our growers is to have a longer term relationship, and in years that maybe they could sell their fruit to someone for more money, that they still will sell to us, because in the years that they can't sell their fruit, they still have us to turn to. And so that's kind of my role, is to keep that, that grape flow coming in the right way. And, this brand, we have made our growers happy. They are able to grow more fruit for us. I have a few other growers that I continue to talk with and would like to bring into the program, and so we can continue to grow this brand. It's just a matter of, we have capacity at our production facility. We have some growers that we can bring on, and if we can continue to grow good, fun, interesting fruit and make good wines at the price point that these, wines are, and in this new package, then I think we can sell some more of this stuff. And, it's just as easy for me to make a little more as it is to make what I'm making. So I'm excited about the future of this brand. I do think, I've been making these wines, as you said, for I think 7 vintages now. And we're, in the middle of 2021. And those, the grapes on the vines are, we've had bud break, and the buds are there. We'll start flowering in the next couple of weeks and kind of understand what that crop is going to be. And I'm as excited about the wines that we have coming as the wines that we have here. And I think that, not to say that the old package wasn't great, but it's nice to have this new design to show our pride in what we've been doing and what we're putting in the bottle. And hopefully that'll help sell a little more wine, William.
I would agree. I mean, again, we're proud of the label. We're proud of the direction. We're proud of you. And, the wines speak for themselves. So, I can't thank you again
Well,
enough for what you do, and how you're able to maintain those relationships with those growers and make a phenomenal glass of wine for me to drink on the weekends.
Well, I appreciate it. And if any of you out there listening to our to my diatribe today on what I do, if you haven't tasted these wines, you need to go out and buy a bottle, get a bottle, and taste them, because these are I think they're fun wines. I'm sitting here. I have a half full bottle of Chardonnay. I have a half full bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, because that's what I've been drinking. With my Cinco de Mayo tacos last night. So Sauvignon
Brilliant.
Blanc and tacos, a great combination.
Touch of green chili, a little cilantro goes a long way with that SB.
Oh, it was good. Let me promise you. And so if you have leftover tacos, get a bottle of Rootstock and have it with your leftover tacos.
Well, very cool, my friend. So, do look out for the next Instagram Live interviews that we'll be doing with some of our winery partners around the world. If you happen to have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of your Wilson Daniels reps, myself, or even Vance. He's available not only on the Rootstock Wine new Instagram page, but also on De Jour Dining, which is his foray into. He's an amazing chef, and so he blew us away back in 2014, where he did a what was it, 5-course dinner for the entire team, and we realized that he is a Renaissance man. He is a man talented in so many areas that I could only hope to make a dish as well as he does. So
Well,
you got to
it's,
check him out.
the winemaking and being a chef are really the same thing. You're trying to take a raw ingredient and turn it into something flavorful. Uh, Doing it as a chef, I can do it every single day. And if I get it wrong, throw it down, cook something else, order pizza, whatever. If With wine, I get one chance every year to get it right. So I can't afford to get it wrong. But as I say, same thing. You're just turning a raw ingredient into something flavorful, and that's what I try to do in both my wine and food worlds.
Well, you certainly do it, my friend. Well, I'll let you get back to it. So, again, thanks for everybody chiming in, listening. Alexa had to say something great. She agrees with the Pinot Noir, review. And it's always better when you get it from someone that's only too often your toughest critic to say that you're making some amazing wines. So thanks again, Vance. Really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for chiming in and checking in.
Thank you, William. Appreciate it. Drink some Rootstock.
Definitely. Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.